Welcome to the Six for Sixers podcast. I am your host, Creek, back at you again to discuss, of course, our Philadelphia 76ers. And this broadcast is coming almost 24 hours late because I was steaming hot at the game yesterday. And I don't want to be the one to get, everything is recorded and publicized on YouTube. I don't want to have a bad attitude on the internet. I don't want to make a name for myself that way. I want to make a name for myself by just doing a good job analyzing the game. Yesterday's game made me real hot, so I figured I'd waste some time, chill out, come back with some facts. So what we do on the Six for Sixers podcast is we break down the Sixers games in 6 points, and sometimes we go into overtime, which today I think we might need a little bit of overtime. The game was a good game. It was an entertaining game. It was a fun game to watch. Both teams played really well for the most part. In terms of it being competitive, it was a very competitive game. I was proud of the way the Sixers played, even though they did not get the victory, and we'll get into that. The Sixers went down to the Los Angeles Clippers 108-107. Obviously, a 1-point game, very, very close game. Obviously, the game had a bunch of subplots. Nick Batum came over in that Clippers trade, and he's too old to really seek revenge. He made a statement that he's pretty much matured from that type of mentality. But it's still nice to get a win against your old team. James Harden, formerly of the 76ers last couple years, now a member of the Los Angeles Clippers, and didn't end on great terms with the Sixers. So the fans were riled up. So the two subplots right there. Then you had Russell Westbrook coming back from injury. So there was some mystery there to see how he was going to play. And the last thing, I guess, is that the Sixers just manhandled the Clippers in Los Angeles. So I figured, hey, we manhandled them in Los Angeles, beat them handily, and now we're in the Wells Fargo Center. We're at home. Should be another victory. At least I wanted it to be. I really like beating those players that either left the team or didn't want to be a part of the team. But James Harden and the Clippers got the win. So let me break down the game for you in my 6 points, my 6 main points. And my point number one is a point that I very rarely make in the game of basketball or really any game. I guess in football sometimes it happens, but in basketball I always feel like there are so many different plays and different scenarios and different opportunities during the game that it's hard to blame the referees for one play or a couple plays. But my point number one is I really did feel in this game that the referees had an impact on the outcome of the game. And referees should never have an impact on the outcome of the game. Like who wins or loses is very important for the players to decide that on the floor. Referees should not have that kind of power to turn the tide of a game. And I felt that in the closing minutes, this referee crew did not do a great job of adequately calling fouls in the game and other calls that they really missed. There were a couple really, really key moments, and I'll go over a couple of those. One moment was a foul on Kelly Oubre, which he went to the basket, and it was actually a foul. It was clear contact made. You could see it from TV from sitting on your sofa. So I know the refs had to be able to see it standing right there next to the play. But it was called a jump ball. That jump ball led to a and one score on the other end by Kawhi Leonard, which put the Clippers up 1. That was a very critical 3-point swing and really should have been Kelly Oubre going to the line for two shots, which if he makes, because he's not a great 3-point shooter, free throw shooter, but if he makes both free throws, then that instead puts us up 4 instead of being down 1. That's a huge swing. The other 9 call. Now, the reason why that Nick Nurse wanted that to be reviewed, it couldn't be reviewed, was because it was a 9 call. It was actually a jump ball. So it wasn't like the refs called something and Nurse was challenging. There was actually nothing to challenge. And he made an issue about that, and it was not a challengeable play. The other one was, I felt that in the closing seconds, Kelly Oubre had the ball and he went to the basket. I did feel as if he got fouled on that play as well. That's one that's a little bit more tricky because the refs are usually not going to call that last play a foul unless it's an egregious, blatant hack. It's just not going to happen. So there were other plays that I felt the refs were giving more calls to the Clippers than they were to the Sixers. It allowed the Clippers to gain momentum in the third and fourth quarter, and eventually they were able to take over the game and ultimately win the game. That's a bad way to lose. Nick Nurse was very vocal. Kelly Oubre was very vocal on the court after the game to the refs. Nurse actually approached the refs, had a lot to say, and they did not respond. Oubre backed him up because Oubre, as he said in his post game, anytime you see your coach giving that kind of energy, he wanted to back him up. He backed him up with some choice words of his own, which he later apologized for. But I don't think he owed the refs an apology. The refs themselves admitted to missing a call in the last seconds of the game, last minutes of the game, particularly that one where Oubre got fouled by Kawhi Leonard. So the refs acknowledge it, but acknowledging it after the fact does not change the outcome of the game. Sixers still got to hold that L. Still really, really affected us in the standings. We're trying to move out of the play-in tournament. Only so many games left. I believe we're a game and a half behind the Pacers. I think the Knicks have moved up to third place. So that's a game that we really could have used. And I think that the game was in reach, was in grasp. I don't think the Clippers were that dominant. The Clippers looked old. They are. They're one of the oldest teams in the league. And I just felt that those last calls by the referees, or 9 calls, gave them somewhat of an advantage. That being said, we were up 15 points at a point in the game. And one could argue that we should have held on to that lead or somewhere close to that lead, and we let that go. It should not have been that close anyway. So that's my point number 1, is that I believe the referees had an influence on the game. But not ultimately. The Sixers got to hold the L because they just didn't do enough. And anytime you let it be that close where the referees can decide the game, you should just not let it be that close anyway. It's kind of like in boxing when a boxer gets a bad decision. Well, if you're going to win, beat the champ, you got to do it decisively. And the Clippers are not the champs, but you sometimes have to be more decisive with your play so that it doesn't leave it up to 1 or 2 calls at the end of the game. Point number 2, Nick Batum. On Facebook, I had been critical of Nick Batum a few games ago because he wasn't producing offensively. It looked like he knows where he's a smart player, so he knows where to go on the floor. He covers the floor well defensively. I mean, he's setting screens for guys. He's doing all the right things. But I just felt that if he's not a scoring threat, it's kind of like having a bigger, taller PJ Tucker on the floor, whereas Tucker could stand in the corner indefinitely and nobody would even guard him. because they just didn't see him as a threat to score. Earlier in the season, I thought Nick Batum was a threat to score, and he put pressure on the defense to actually guard those corners or guard him moving around, and he had stopped doing that. Well, last night he actually picked it up. He just does everything right, in my opinion. Batum doesn't make a lot of mistakes on the floor, and I think he's unselfish to a fault almost. Last night he was 50% from the field, three for 6 from 3-point for 9 points. And he was very, very, very aggressive defensively. He had a track down block on James Harden, which James Harden thought he got past him. Batum came, recovered, blocked the shot. I think Batum is so important to the team because he brings that veteran presence. He's not shaken by the big lights, and he doesn't expend a lot of energy, doesn't do a lot of unnecessary things. Just a very technical basketball player. And I thought that out of all of the scoring and all of the things that we look at in the stats, I thought that his presence was probably second to the referee's presence. But as a player, I think he's really a glue guy on the team. And great game by Batum. Point number three is what I mentioned earlier. We had a 15-point lead. The Sixers have had issues with holding leads. In playing 4 quarters, we go up big, but then have a letdown quarter or 2 and let teams back in it. Last night was no exception. Had a letdown in the 3rd and the 4th quarter and allowed the Clippers to come back. And it appeared as if we had them handled in the first 2 quarters. Didn't appear that they were going to be able to handle us like it was going to be a repeat of the first game. And in the second half, they just surged on us. Westbrook didn't look great in the first half. He's quick to the basket still, but his shot wasn't falling. And we just let them back in it. We do that frequently, playing 4 quarters. We are stretched a little thin because of injuries. However, we have to do a better job closing games out. We have to do a better job of turning up that intensity to actually put teams away when we have them on the ropes. We had the Clippers on the ropes, and teams always make runs. We know that. It's just pro sports. You're not going to hold a lead without a team actually surging and starting to try to close that gap. But when they surge, we also have to turn up our level of intensity to kind of halt that surge that they have. And I didn't feel we did that last night. So that's my point number 3, is just holding the lead and continuing to play for 4 quarters the same way you played in the quarter 1 and quarter 2, close the game that way. Point number 4, Maxey had a very complete game. Maxey is emerging as a leader, which is very, very important. Not just a scorer, but the leader of the team. Especially when Embiid is out, where we so desperately need somebody to step in and be that point person, the one that the team is looking to. And Maxey is stepping up into that role. Statistically, he had 26 points, 8 rebounds, 8 assists, and 7 rebounds. Great game. But I think that I would like to see Maxey do less of the pull-up 3-pointers without giving the offense an opportunity to work or go through his progression. Sometimes he just pulls up, and when he makes it, that's great. We cheer that. But then when he misses it, it can be detrimental to the team because the team hasn't even set up offensively. They're not always prepared for him to just shoot a 3 like that. And on one particular occasion, the 3 rebounded, led to a very long rebound, easy layup on the other end. So I think that Maxey is growing, and I think that he's only going to get better. So I'm not critical of him because he played a great game. He was everywhere on the floor. But there's just a couple things I think for next season he should work on, and he'll be even better player next year because of his leadership acumen, which is growing, and we didn't see that last year or in previous years. Point number 5, we call him the posterizer. We call him one half of the Meat Brothers, and we also call him KO, and that stands for knockout. Oubre is emerging as a really a great free agent candidate in the offseason. Hopefully the Sixers can retain him. He is really, really showing up. It's not so much his points. He had 17 points, 11 rebounds. The rebounds are great. The points are great, but it's just his intensity and his energy. He goes to the basket unafraid with a reckless abandonment, ready to try to dunk on anybody. Sometimes he's successful, sometimes he's not, but it's more of what it means to the other team that we're going to take it right to you. And he was no exception last night. He was going to the basket. Didn't matter who was down there, Zubac, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, he's going to the basket. And it makes a great statement when he does that. I did feel that he got fouled, as I stated previously, on the play that was called a jump ball. But that was, again, him being aggressive, him not taking it short on getting to the basket. And we don't have a lot of players that play with that type of fire. Maxey goes to the hoop with the layups, but Harris does not show the aggression that Oubre Jr. does. He is relentless. And I thought that he should have gotten both of those foul calls at the end. I also feel that at that very last play, he could have pulled up for a jumper. He did have some space to pull up. He did not have to try to make it to the rim. It really didn't seem like when he grabbed the ball and he started to go to the basket, I'm just yelling, pull up for the jumper. Not necessarily a 3-pointer. You only needed a 2-pointer. But he was trying to get all the way to the basket, and it really wasn't enough time to get all the way to the basket. So I think he should have pulled up for the jumper. He is relentless. And he gets my 5th point. A lot of respect for Kelly Oubre Jr. And then respect at the end of the game with him standing next to his coach and still continuing to voice his opinion to the referees. So he made such a great difference. So good game, Oubre Jr. Keep it moving to the 6th point. Nick Nurse. I think overall Nick Nurse managed the lineup well. It's tough when you have so many players in and out of the lineup, but I think that Nurse did a pretty good job of managing it. Some on Facebook were critical of him because we had just beaten the Clippers with a particular lineup, and Nurse strayed away from that lineup. He didn't play Campaign. Campaign only played 4 minutes, and Campaign in the last win was very instrumental in us beating the Clippers. Nicholas Batum did not play in the last game, but he played this game, which we're not going to bench Nick Batum. But the lineup changed. KJ Martin did not get a lot of time. Let me see. KJ Martin did not play. So he didn't play at all. But in the previous game against the Clippers, KJ had a pretty good game. At least in terms of his energy off the bench. Let me see what KJ had. Last game against KJ Martin had 19 minutes and 5 rebounds. He scored 4 points, but that's still energy. Campaign in the previous game had 25 minutes off the bench, and even hold on. So, hold on. I think I got it wrong, but yeah, I did. I'm on the wrong game. Because I knew KJ Martin did more than that. So KJ Martin against the Clippers, I was reading the stats from the Kings game. Against the Clippers, KJ Martin had 24 minutes for 8 points. Cam Payne had 24 minutes for 23 points. And Paul Reed had 24 minutes for 10 points. So that was kind of a younger lineup. Dalton, he came off the bench and he had 12 minutes. And as a younger lineup, the Clippers are a particularly older team. Paul George, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, all those guys are in the mid 30s. And those are their main guys. So Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, James Harden, and Russell Westbrook. So I just felt like, and it was said on Facebook too, that maybe the team should have stuck with that lineup and not tried to take Cam Payne's minutes away. Kyle Lowry did not play in the last game versus the Clippers, but played in this game. But overall, I think Nick Nurse is doing a good job. It's very difficult creating those type of rotations when you have a lot of injuries and not knowing who's going to be available and what's going to happen. So he's still playing with passion. Coaching with passion. And at the end of the game, he showed that passion by going head up against the refs. So shout out to Nick Nurse. That's my point number 6. And that is the 6 for Sixers podcast. I'm your host, Creek. Please like, share, subscribe, comment, invite your friends, invite your mama, invite your daddy, invite your brother, invite your sister to join in on the podcast. Add a comment so I can see what the community's saying. Give us a like, a thumbs up, all of that great stuff. Also, join the Facebook page because I do post the write-ups after every game, even if I don't go live on Facebook, so that you can see it in written form. And then there's a robust community on Facebook that is always filled with intelligent talk about the Sixers game. So let's keep moving on to the next. See what the Sixers have in the next game. And go Sixers always, no matter what. Next game is tomorrow night against the Cleveland Cavaliers. And we desperately need to get that win. Let me see what the standings look at before we get out of here. We are in the 8th spot, but we are really pretty much tied with the Heat and only a game and a half behind the Pacers. So if we can get a win or two, we can move straight up into that 6th spot, which is what the goal is. Let's see if they can do it. I believe they can do it. And reports that Joel Embiid might be coming back soon came out today. So hopefully we get the big fella back in enough time that he can get in game shape. But shout out to everybody on the community, and I'll see you after the Cavaliers game. May try to go live. All right, 6 for Sixers, and we are out. Peace.